Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the devotees here this evening, you've been practicing Krishna consciousness for some time. Is there anybody here, say it negative, is anybody here that's new? No, okay, good. We've been reading for quite some time now from Canto 10, Chapter 14. We call it Brahma's Prayers, but the first 40 verses are Brahma's Prayers, and we're beyond Brahma's Prayers. We're in a section now where Brahma has gone back to Brahmaloka, and Krishna went back where the calves were for 1 year. Moo. And he took on the calves to where the cowherd boys were, and they hadn't even eaten one bite from their lunch from 1 year ago. And they said, "You're so attached, you can't be away from us for a moment. Sit down and finish your meal, finish lunch." And laughing and joking and doing what they do together. And Krishna was so happy. Krishna was so happy. Because he had been away from them for a year. And you know how they are towards Krishna, and Krishna is towards them. Yatamam prapadyante. So he was very, very happy. They were very, very happy. They finished lunch, and they went back home with the calves. And while they were going back home, they were singing songs of Krishna's activities, because that's what you do when you're a Brijbasi. You sing and dance. And the singing is about Krishna. And the dancing is celebrating Krishna's association and activities and so forth. And when they reached the village, the cowherd elders, particularly focus goes to the ladies, they were extremely joyful. And there was a, joyful and comparative and superlative. They were more joyful than ever before. And so the section we're reading is, Maharaj Parikshit says, wait a minute, could you explain how they were more attached to Krishna than to their own children? And then there's been this discussion. Well, the whole Leela of Krishna manifesting as their sons was because before the Brahma Vimohan Leela, they had more attachment for Krishna than for their sons. And mothers may have affection for some other child, but there's natural affection for their own children. And then, when the 1 year passed where Krishna was their son, they had more attraction for Krishna when he was their son than when he wasn't their son. Which is natural because there's the attraction for Krishna and then the attraction for the son. You put the two of them together and they're more attracted. But astonishing was they were more attracted than ever before. So how's that? Maharaj Parikshit wants to know. So there's a whole series of verses describing, in one sense, describing bodily conception of life, and then the transcendental conception of life. And the discussion yesterday evening was a little tough going. It was in essence saying the attachment for the temporary is resting upon the eternal. It's resting upon the Atma. And it's going to continue this evening. But in the course of that discussion, the phrase was being used, as is used throughout the Acharya's commentaries about possessiveness. And it's just very special for the residents of Vrindavan. They have a special sense of possessiveness towards Krishna. And the Sanskrit word for possessiveness, well, there's two of them, and we're going to discuss that first. Mamata is one, and mamatva. Those of you that know Sanskrit grammar rules, you probably know it's the same root. And in one situation you call it mamata, and in that situation you call it mamatva, having the quality of mama, mine, possessiveness. So, for those of you that are curious or would like to hear, there are two verses from quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, specifically Lord Chaitanya's talks with Rupa Goswami in describing the science of bhakti. So if you want to make note, you can look them up later or not. Madhya 23, text number 7 and 8. Madhya 23, text 7 and 8. And what Lord Chaitanya is describing to Rupa Goswami is taken from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami's writing, going from bhava to prema. So there are three characteristics when bhava turns into prema. And when those three characteristics are present, bhava becomes prema. And mamata, or mamatva, is one of those three. So the residents of Vrindavan have mamatva, possessiveness, or they have mamata towards the object Krishna. And here's from Rupa Goswami's writing. This is when the bhava stage softens the heart completely, becomes endowed with a great feeling of possessiveness in relation to the Lord, and becomes very much condensed and intensified. It is called prema, or love of Godhead, by learned scholars. That's from 1.4.1 Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, a direct quote from Rupa Goswami's writings, but it's now being presented here in terms of Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Rupa Goswami. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time with the Sanskrit. This isn't meant to be a nectar devotion class, but it's to help us understand Brahma's prayers, or this section of the Bhagavatam. The primary characteristic is bhava sa eva sandratma. Sandra, atma. Sandra, atma, condensed and intensified. That's primary. So a very mature stage of bhava, condensed and intensified. And something that's secondary, that assists it, and where you have the intense and intensified, it comes, is this mamatva, a sense of ownership. And there's an adjective, in abundance, atishaya, ankita. There's a devotee in Naperville, his name is Ankit. Ankita, marked with abundance of mamatva, ownership of the object. No, there's the material and there's the spiritual. Somebody can be really possessive of something material, and something can be really possessive of something spiritual, or Krishna. But the prema stage is, the object is Krishna, possessive. So that's the meaning of this. It's, he's mine. Not in the material sense of mine. The material sense of mine, well, here, it's coming up in this evening's discussion. There's the two psychic divisions of material consciousness, I and mine, right? And mama. Aham mameti, from the Bhagavatam. Iti, it was thus. Aham and mama, material consciousness. I'm this body, and what's mine is in relation to this body. Mine, and you fill in the blank. My family, my bank balance, my house, my paraphernalia, the fruits of my work is mine. So with the fruits of work, I buy stuff, and that's mine, and that's mine. That's comes from the body. Mine, I and mine. And there's a spiritual possessiveness, where one is beyond the bodily conception, and that's what's being discussed. This is the residents of Vrindavan. They're beyond the bodily conception, and they're very possessive of Krishna. They're in the prema stage. Intense. According to Rupa Goswami, we'll read, but those who are in Vaikuntha, they also have some possessiveness, in a different way than the Brijvasis have towards the Lord. But it's an exclusive. Of course, their mood is service, and in Vrindavan, it's service plus. He's my son. He's my friend. He's my beloved. It's more intensified. Those things don't exist in Vaikuntha. Krishna is not somebody's son. Krishna is not somebody's friend. Except for the goddess of fortune, Krishna is not somebody's beloved. Possessiveness is weaker. It's there. Prahlad towards Lord Nrsingadev. It's service, dasya. You're the master, I'm the servant, there's nothing else. So the point I'm making here is, I'm going through this exercise because woven into the words of the Bhagavatam is gold. And Rupa Goswami and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're gold miners, and they take the gold. And they show you, here it is, there's gold. So we can just read the Bhagavatam, and not, because you're not gold detectors, we don't see the gold, but it's there. And by reading it, it stimulates that kind of love, just by reading it, just the sound vibration. What to speak of if you learn the technology of how to extract the gold from the gold mine, then you know you got something really valuable. But you have something really valuable whether you know it or not. And it's nice to know how valuable it is, because it increases your appreciation for the gift that has been given to us by Prabhupada and disciplic succession and everybody. Okay, so the primary is Sandra or Sandra Atma, condensed, intense bhava. Secondary is this mamatva, sense of ownership, and samyak, you know what that means completely, soft heart. Soft heart. Not that sentimental, but soft heart. Easily stimulated for affection for the object, and that which is in relation to the object. Those are the two secondary and the primary, and when they're there, bhava turns into prema. So that's mamatva. And from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that's 1.4.1. Now get ready for 1.4.2, which says, Ananya mamata Vishnu. So this is, we're going to hear about Narada, Bhisma, and Uddhava. Now, Uddhava is not a Brijbasi, but he's a Krishna Bhakta. And Bhisma is a Krishna Bhakta, but he's not a Brijbasi, and Narada is also. So, Ananya mamata means having a sense of relationship with no others. Ananya mamata Vishnu, mamata prema sangata. Prema sangata, endowed with love, with this mamata, sense of ownership. Bhaktir iti uchate Bhishma, Prahlada, Uddhava, Narada. So there's 4. Translation. When one develops an unflinching sense of ownership or possessiveness in relation to Lord Vishnu, or in other words, when one thinks Vishnu and no one else to be the only object of love, such an awakening is called bhakti, or devotion, by exalted persons like Bhishma, Prahlad, Uddhava, and Narada. That's a direct Prabhupada's quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita in his discussions with Rupa Goswami about the process of bhakti. And there's many other references where mamata is used. Here's one. It's in the talks between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy. Familiar, right? So when Lord Chaitanya has his talks with Ramananda Roy, what's the goal of life and the means to achieve it? And he gives a verse from this chapter 14. It says, that's it. Don't go further. And in the further discussion, it's speaking of spontaneous. Ramananda Roy is speaking to Lord Chaitanya about spontaneous devotional service. Spontaneous loving service to the Lord is called devotional service with an intimate attachment between the servitor and the served. This intimacy is called mamata. Between the servitor and the served, there's a feeling of oneness. So, intimacy, possessiveness, inseparable affection, that kind of oneness. Now, the word mamata appears in this evening's verse, by the way. No accident, we're discussing this. But so now let's step back from Rupa Goswami and the Nectar Devotion class. And what's the question that's being asked by Maharishi Parikshit to Shukadev, wait a minute. How is it possible? How to understand? The mothers were more attached to Krishna than to their sons. And they're more attached to Krishna than the other two situations when they were attached to Krishna. Why? No, the answer is given right away, even before he asked his question, and that is, Krishna is in such a state of ecstasy because he's with his boyfriends and he hasn't been with them for a whole year, and he's really exuding joyfulness, and they feel that intimacy with Krishna, and he's so joyful they become more joyful than even before. Krishna's happiness is the happiness of the beloved. But the opportunity is being presented in a whole series of verses where Shukadeva Goswami is answering Maharaj Parikshit's question by giving a kind of "you're not this body" class. And then more than "you're not this body," if you're not only you're the soul, but the real affinity goes to Krishna. And then there's things that are of the soul, they're connected to the soul. There's a whole Sambandha Gyan topic of what's the world in relation to the soul. It's a Sambandha Gyan topic, right in this 14th chapter. So I'm just going to read. That's why I asked, if there's any new people here, because I don't want to lose too many listeners. Okay, so in the first line, Deho, or Deha, that's the body, and Dehi is the possessor of the body, right? Deha and Dehi. Same dhatu, but one is the body and the other is possessor of the body. So this is Deha, Api, Mamata Bhak. Even for those, the body is the Mamata Bhak, the focus of possessiveness. Then there's this realization, hey, there's the body that I'm attached to, and then there's the one that's attached. That's me. I'm different than the body. You may lament if some limb is damaged or severed, but it's a whole other thing than losing your life. Which is more an object of attachment, the body or the Atma. And the value that we place in the body is because the value we place in the Atma. That's what's being said in yesterday's evening's verse. Okay, so here's the translation. If a person comes to the stage, if the person comes to the stage considering the body as mine instead of me, he will certainly not consider the body as dear as his own self. More dear than mine is me. After all, even as the body is growing old and useless, one's desire to continue living remains strong. This is Shukadev speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, addressing his question. Remember, there's the philosophy to answer the question. The question is, how come the mothers were more attached to Krishna than to their own sons? One is more attached to the self than to the extension. And the possessiveness of the ladies of Vrindavan is so great towards Krishna. It's greater than even their sons. Is it clear? Okay, good. Purport, BBT purport. The word mamata bhak is very significant here. An ordinary, foolish person thinks, I am this body. A more discriminating, intelligent person thinks, this is my body. In the literature and folklore of ordinary people, we find the common theme of an old, decrepit person dreaming of obtaining a new, young body. Thus, even ordinary persons pick up the notion of self-realization, instinctively understanding that it is possible for the soul to exist in many different bodies. Paragraph. As the body of an intelligent person becomes old and useless, he strongly desires to live, even when he knows that his body cannot live much longer. This indicates that he is gradually becoming aware that his self is more important than his body. Thus, simply the desire for life can indirectly bring one to a preliminary understanding of self-realization. And in this case as well, one's basic attachment is to one's own self and not to that which supposedly belongs to oneself. Paragraph. It may be pointed out that the entire discussion between King Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami regarding the dearness of one's own self is ultimately meant for broaching the subject of why the cows and cowherd ladies of Vrindavan considered Krishna more dear than their own selves, and certainly more dear than their own offspring. The discussion proceeds as follows. It's a whole series of verses. It's the psychology of attachment to Krishna. And where the absence of Krishna, then there's other attachment, and in the presence of Krishna, there's attachment to Krishna. And how does it work? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, his commentary, short. In this verse, the point is made that the person conscious of his body as self, that's the previous verse, also holds the soul more dear than the body when he has some temporary realization. With a slight discrimination, when the attachment changes to the soul, even the bodily conscious person develops more love for the soul than the body. The body becomes dear because of the soul. Evidence is then given. What's that? Seeing the difficulties of the self on giving up the body, the person understands that they are not the pains of the soul, but only the body. Out of affection for the soul, he has the desire to keep the soul in that body. Again, out of affection for the soul, he has the desire to keep the soul in that body. That's the metaphor to lend support to the principle. Attachment is to the soul. Where it's going is, and because we read this yesterday evening, the Paramatma feature, who is Krishna's expansion, is affectionate to all souls. And if affection goes to the soul, then naturally affection goes to Paramatma, naturally goes to Krishna, who is the source of Paramatma. And, for the Brijvasis. Or those who are in the stage of prema. Or those that have mamata. Or an intensified and thickened, concentrated bhava towards the object, Krishna. And soft hearts. Jiva Goswami writes, the position of the undiscriminating person who thinks the body as his self is described. This is explained by Sridhar Swami. The word api indicates that although he gets old and is even about to die or is dependent on sons, still the desire to live is strong. Or api can simply act to join the ideas. In his second explanation, Sridhar Swami, the person with no discrimination desires to live even after aging. This is a criticism. Therefore, the wise person sees the body as the possession of the self. There's this mamata again. Possession of. So what's more dear? The self or the object of possession. And commonly we experience one is more attached to the self, but the attachment to the body is because it's connected to the self as a sense of possessive object. So, therefore, the wise person sees the body as the possession of the self and not as dear. The body does not last as long. It dies. Therefore, one should not hope for it to continue living. That's rational. There is another meaning. Jiva Goswami writes, the body, which was considered to be the soul in the previous verse, the ahankara person, it was specifically described, identifying the self to be the body. The body, which was considered to be the soul in the previous verse, is not dear, like the soul is dear. Since one becomes afflicted by disease, the desire to live in the body becomes weaker. When it happens, you become sick, really sick, and the body becomes very weak. The desire to live becomes weaker. That's his point. Abaliyasi. By discrimination, a person understands that the body is not the self, and thus is no longer as dear. And ending? Well, we could go another verse, but here's Kramasandarbha. Kramasandarbha is one of Jiva Goswami's 4 sandarbhas, 4 commentaries on the Bhagavatam. And this one is the verse-by-verse one, Kramasandarbha. If a person comes to the stage of considering the body mine instead of me, he will certainly not consider the body as dear as his own self. After all, even as the body is growing old and useless, one's desire to continue living remains strong. Paragraph. He takes the position of persons who think they are the body. By removing the concept of me and mine from the body, one realizes Atma. Thinking of sons takes place in the condition of ignorance. Predominance of such ignorance is criticized. The opposite is the person having discrimination or discernment. Because of possessiveness, when the body and sons decay, the desire to live within that body becomes stronger, since the body is related to the Atma. It's a little complicated, but I think you get the idea. And I'll just read a little bit beginning into the next verse, because they connect, and then we'll end. Text 54, 10:14:54. Tasmat means therefore. So this is like the summary verse of the whole section, midsection. Therefore, it is his own self that is most dear to every embodied living being, and it is simply for the satisfaction of this self that the whole material creation is moving and non-moving entities exists. That's the verse. That's Shukadeva Goswami. And the BBT purport is short. The word chara-charam indicates moving living entities, such as animals, and non-moving entities such as trees, chara and achara, moving and non-moving. Or the word can also refer to moving possessions, such as one's family and pets, and non-moving possessions such as one's house and household paraphernalia. Vishwanath writes, really short, therefore one can conclude that one's own soul is more dear than others' souls. For the benefit of one's soul, one holds other entities such as sons and objects such as house as somewhat dear. Jiva Goswami writes, the word chara, what was that? Down? Okay. The word chara refers to the body and sons. Achara refers to house and other possessions. One thinks of everything in this world in relation to oneself. But by that, everything becomes an object, a pleasure for the self. So I think that where all of this I call it a train. Where this train is going is circling back to Krishna, because the body and the object connected to the body and the soul that's the basis of the body and the objects connected to the body is the Supreme Soul. So it says, Sukadeva Goswami says, you should know Krishna to be the original soul of all souls, for the benefit of the whole universe. He has, out of his causeless mercy, appeared as an ordinary human being. He has done this by the strength of his internal potency. So we'll continue with all this tomorrow evening. No, next time we get together. Tomorrow evening is going to be dedicated to the Singapore devotees, because our evening is their morning. And their morning tomorrow is Chinese New Year. And I have come to understand from associating with the Chinese devotees, Chinese New Year is, it's the biggest holiday. I mean, our biggest holiday may be whatever it is, 4th of July or Christmas Day or something or other. For Vaishnavas, it's Krishna Janmashtami. For them, it's Chinese New Year. Their national holiday is really big too. But so that's tomorrow morning their time, tomorrow evening, Friday morning their time. And is Friday Purnima? Because this was Ekadasi just 2 days ago. Look it up on your little machine. Is the 12th Purnima?
No. 14th is Amavas. Monday is Amavas.
Monday is Purnima?
Amavas.
When is Purnima?
27th of February. 27th of February.
Thursday, today.
Thursday?
Yeah, today.
Purnima. When is Purnima? Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Okay, so in China it's Monday. Excuse me. Anyway. I believe it's connected to Purnima. So their calendar is the lunar calendar, and the New Year starts on Friday morning their time. So it's national holiday. It's national holiday. People don't work. People don't work in China. People don't work in Singapore. So we're starting tomorrow evening. It's a rerun. They heard about it and wanted me to. So we're going to go do virtual Govardhan Parikrama for 4 days, or 4 classes. Thursday evening, Friday evening, Saturday evening, and Sunday morning, which will be Sunday evening, their time. So we'll come back to this chapter 14, I guess, probably Monday. But now you know where the train's going. Krishna is the soul of all souls. And as there's attachment, more attachment for the soul than that which is connected to the soul, the mind, when it comes to Krishna, because he's the soul of all souls, and he's even the soul of the source of Paramatma. These Brijbasis have such mamata or mamatva toward Krishna that when Krishna is very happy, they're very happy. And that's life in Braja. He's giving us a Braja lesson, but while also giving us, you're not the body lesson. It's really nice. And it's a science of rasa. Now we're not, we can know the science of rasa and not be feeling it. But we certainly have some feeling of attachment for the soul. And hearing about Krishna and life that's attached to Krishna It's very attractive. And like many things in life, we find somebody says, hey, did you try it? Whatever it is. This food or this exercise or this yoga something or something. Hey, sounds nice. It's like marketing. Let me go get some. But aside from, attracting the mind, it's attracting the heart, because it's what's natural for us. It's what's natural for the soul, is this attraction for Krishna. The Bhagavatam is taking us to Braja Prem, the topmost. And our acharyas are in a big assist role, taking us to Braja Prem. Even in the course of this real simple question, why were the you got 2 phones, you got 3 phones? Okay. I think my phone will ring if somebody calls me. I better shut it off. Okay, so let's see if there's, it's nice. Just taking the Bhagavatam and opening it and diving in, taking an assist from our acharyas. It's entrance into another world, entrance into the spiritual world, the consciousness of Krishna world. Any discussion? It's a good idea if you have done this ahead of time rather than, okay? Haribol, anybody would like to discuss something from this topic?
I could not understand this point where, like you said,
Take your mask off so I can hear you better.
Yes,
Thanks.
Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you very much for the nice class, Maharaj.
You turned your phones off, right?
Yeah, I turned off
Oh,
my
okay.
phone. Maharaj, like this, the metaphor you mentioned, desire to keep soul in this body, I couldn't actually relate it much. Like our affection to the soul is keeping us to connect to the body and the mind. I didn't understand that. Can you elaborate that part?
I'm not sure what you're not understanding. I mean, the essence of what's being said here is there is attachment for the body, but when you think about it, the discriminating person who thinks about it, the attachment to the body has everything to do with, not just something, but everything to do with attachment for the soul that's within the body. One thing is resting, the real discriminating person can have realizations that one that's not discriminating can't have. And a discriminating person can understand the attachment for the temporary, this body, has everything to do with the animating force within the body. It's another way, this is just another way of saying what we often hear Prabhupada say, the dehinosman yata dehe explanation. Any discriminating person can understand. The baby body I once had, he tells a story, I remember when I was 6 months old, I was sitting in the lap of my sister, she was knitting. You've heard that before. And I distinctly remember, but that baby body is gone. Then he became a child, then he became a boy, then he became a young man. Now I'm an old man. But I'm still me, I have all those memories, but the body is gone. So a discriminating person can understand I'm still existing, but the body is temporary. That's one way. This is another way. The attachment for the body has everything to do with the presence of the soul, who you really are. It's it leads to some degree of detachment from the temporary and realization of self. Okay? Good. Anything? Yes? No?
No.
Okay. Okay, we're going to go. You have something? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Brajavasis have so much love for Krishna, even, more than their own child. But
Pretty amazing, huh?
yeah, but coming to us, we have more affection on family and our
Of course.
kids only.
We're not Brijbasis yet.
Yeah, but to improve that, what we can do, Maharaj?
Bhakti. And hear about and associate with those who have more attachment for Krishna than we do. You associate with advanced devotees, sadhu sangha, and shravana, hearing the message of elevated souls and their consciousness and their behavior and their speech and their conduct and their feelings, their heart.
Thank you.
The Bhagavatam has all that. I'm a Bhagavatam fan. Anything else? Okay, we're going to go online. You have something?
We hear about all this wonderful rasas with Krishna, and at the same time, if all the three top rasas are not in Vaikuntha.
There's some connection with the microphone and the wire. Okay, there we go.
So, if these three top rasas are not in Vaikuntha, when I'm looking comparatively, I feel like it's kind of dry in Vaikuntha. So, wondering.
Kind of what?
Dry.
Dry. What is dry?
Means it seems like there's no rasa
Where?
in Vaikuntha. I mean, there's
More rasa than where?
Exchange with.
More rasa there than where?
Than Goloka, I'm saying.
Than here?
No,
Or Goloka?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You're welcome.
No, the rasas are more in Goloka than Vaikuntha.
Okay.
So, just wondering what is there in Vaikuntha that keeps the souls engaged and connected with Krishna?
Connected with Krishna or Narayan?
I mean, Narayan in there.
What keeps them connected to Narayan? Love.
So is it in Vaikuntha? It's only Dasya and Shantaras, right?
Dasya. There's some Shanta, but it's, there's less intimacy, put it that way. Aside from which rasas are there, there's less intimacy. So your question is what keeps them in a place where there's less intimacy? Why wouldn't they want more intimacy? That's your question?
No.
No.
I was just wondering what is the joy that they are getting in
Service,
Vaikuntha?
love.
That's all. It's a love.
An example that what Prabhupada would give is sometimes there's a house servant. And after this, there's a servant. They have menial function, or a driver of a big man. And what he does is, when it's time for the big man to go somewhere, he gets the car ready and he takes the big man somewhere, and he's the driver. It's a Sudra service, or it's the servant-master relationship. But over a period of time, there comes an intimacy between the housemaid or the driver or the something. And then they become like family. They know all the family stories, and they earn the trust, and there's like family. So Vaikuntha never gets like that. but they're happy in love being a servant to master. Like Prahlad says, there's nothing else between us. Or Hanuman. No, there's an intimacy, but it says service. And Ram holds him very dear. And Hanuman holds Ram very dear. And that's a possessiveness, and that's a Vaikuntha situation. However, there's an intimacy with Lakshman that doesn't exist with Hanuman. Anyway. And in Vaikuntha, the Ayodhya is in the Vaikuntha realm, sometimes called Mahavaikuntha. But in the Vaikuntha realm, they're very he's the Supreme Lord. Veneration, in love. They want to serve him. And they sing hymns of praise and prayer and etc., etc., etc. That's their heart's full content. You ask Hanuman, you want to go to Vrindavan? Ram. They're content. They're not feeling anything other than content in their relationship with the Supreme Lord. And that's their position. They're not thinking, we're missing out on something. Over here.
Thank you, Maharaj. Is it possible for a soul which has fallen from Vaikuntha to go to Golok Vrindavan?
I'm laughing because last night we did around and around and around and around and around and around on the fall from Vaikuntha topic. And I don't really want to go there again. Let me respond to your question in a different way. It's similar to your question, but it's a different question. Tamal Krishna Maharaj told me that he once asked Prabhupada, is it possible for one who becomes attracted to a certain rasa after some time become more attracted to another rasa? And Prabhupada said, why not? The spiritual world is dynamic, not static. It's ecstatic, not static. Now, he didn't explain how and, technology and any of that. But, in response to your question, just leave aside the fall from Vaikuntha part. Just say, if one is immersed. Here's a nice example. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Lord Chaitanya leaves Sri Rangam, where's the next place that he goes? He goes to a place, you look on the map, and it's quite a distance, but what Krishnadas Kaviraj described as his visit to this spontaneous Ram Bhakta. Correct? He's constantly chanting Ram's name. He invites Lord Chaitanya to his home for lunch. Lord Chaitanya shows up, and he's just sitting there. My dear Brahman, what's your intention? Lakshman has gone to the forest to gather edibles. As soon as he returns, I'll prepare your lunch. Please be patient. Commentary. Lord Chaitanya could understand. This man was in a mood of spontaneous love. And it was in his meditation, Lakshman is gathering. Okay, so Lord Chaitanya took lunch and said, Brahman, now it's you take lunch. No, I'm fasting. I'm fasting till death. Why? Sita's been kidnapped. How can I maintain my life when Sita's been kidnapped? I'm fasting till death. You know the story. Okay, so when Lord Chaitanya came back and brought from Kurma Purana verification that it was a Maya Sita that was taken, he heard the Brahmin not chanting Ram's name but Krishna's name. And he asked the Brahmin, here's the book, here's the copy, be happy. What I said was true. But you're chanting Krishna's name, what happened? He said, through your association, my tongue just started chanting Krishna's name. Okay? So spiritual world is dynamic, not static, or ecstatic, not static.
Okay, so then when we hear that soul's constitutional position is meant to serve, that service is not static.
Yeah, that won't change. Serve, 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 or serve, 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 or serve, 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 serve.
But rasa can change.
And form of the Lord may, in this particular case. Now, there's other cases where it didn't. Murari Gupta didn't change. So anyway, it's possible. Your question was, is it possible? And yes, it's possible. Through association, anything is possible. But it may not, also. Even with association. Murari Gupta didn't change. He tried. He couldn't. Okay? Online?
This is from Amara Devi Dasi Mataji. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Attachment to the body is because of the presence of the soul. Krishna is the supreme soul.
Yeah.
Then one should feel great attachment to Krishna. Why does this not happen easily?
Because you're in Maya. The influence of the Lord's illusory potency is very strong. And the illusory potency is extended by Krishna because we wanted to forget Krishna. On the one side, we, you, and I, and the rest of us, we're trying in various degrees to try to restore our relationship with Krishna, but that ingrained deep tendency, and thus covering by Maya, is very strong.
There's the second part of that question is what makes one attracted to the matter when there is no soul?
Maya. Misplaced possessiveness. Mine. It's an object for me to enjoy. It's mine. Like a child. Next.
There's one by
The same question that Prabhu has.
Okay. Is that it? We're done? Anything else in the room? Okay. Yes.
This is a little bit off topic, but yesterday in one of the questions there was mention of karma yoga and shuddha bhakti, and
There was a mention of which and which?
karma yoga,
Karma
and,
yoga
and shuddha bhakti.
and Shuddha Bhakti.
Yeah.
I don't remember that discussion.
It was like really brief, but my understanding was that karma yoga is like dovetailing whatever you like towards
Yes, yes.
Krishna, and then shuddha bhakti is taking your daily activities and doing them for Krishna.
Well, Karma yoga has another specific commonly karma yoga is defined as, there's two types, but it's in both types is offering the fruit to Krishna. Sakam karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga. Sakam karma yoga is, the lower rung. I have a desire. If I act according to my desire, there's a fruit, but I don't want entanglement in the fruit, so I offer the fruit, and I do my duty, the things that are according to my nature, and offer the fruit to Krishna, but I want something. Sakam karma yoga. But so offering the fruit to Krishna. Then nishkam karma, I just do because that's what we're supposed to, that's what elevated souls do. That's what I like doing. Nishkam karma yoga. But it's specific to offering the fruit to Krishna, not specific to dovetailing something I like. And then Shuddha is the place that the service is arising from is one thing. Krishna is to be pleased.
So for everything I do to please.
Yeah. So then you can do things that may not even suit your nature, and you do them because Krishna is to be pleased. Okay, we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.